Well, having been the commander for 3 years, 2021 to 2024, and working with the previous administration prior to Malay, and watching that country with Chinese presence and engagement so prevalent, and this close to
Hmm.
Argentina buying Chinese fighter aircraft, the JF-17. And to see the Malay administration get in the seat, and within 30 days, they bought the Danish F-16 aircraft, NATO interoperable aircraft, and they continue to align with the United States and with democracy. I don't want to say that it's just about aligning with the United States. It's really about this is really between authority. What's going on right now across our globe is
No,
between
it's freedom. Freedom
authoritarianism.
versus authoritarians.
Exactly.
My name is Roger Zakheim, and you're on Reaganism. I'm director of the Reagan Institute. And today we have General Laura Richardson to discuss the Trump administration's activities in U.S. Southern Command and strikes against drug cartels in the region. General Richardson comes to us after 38 years of service in the U.S. Army, flying Black Hawk helicopters, and recently retired as the commander of U.S. Southern Command. General Richardson, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, Roger. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, we're delighted to have you here and hate to interrupt retirement after 38 years serving in our U.S. military, but you have expertise in an area that is now gotten the entire country and perhaps the world focused on. And your last command, where you served for 3 years, I believe, really had the responsibility of our all military U.S. military forces in sort of the Western Hemisphere. Is the way I think about it. Maybe just take a minute for our listeners and viewers to talk about U.S. Southern Command and the roles and responsibilities of the command and the commander.
Well, thank you for that and the opportunity to talk about U.S. Southcom, because what an important command. And obviously now, considering what's happening, as you talked about. But one of the Department of War's six geographic combatant commands. And so as the Department of War splits up the globe into six geographic areas, a four-star general is responsible for working with the country's military forces and public security forces on contingency operations, training, exercises, theater security cooperation, really to build those partnerships and relationships. And so this particular region, having South America, Central America, and the Caribbean, 31 countries,
Wow.
it just is when you think about the opportunities with this region, and I have said several times, I really think this region's been feeding and fueling the world
Mm-hmm.
for the last 15 years with all of the resources, natural resources. And when you think about the largest oil reserves, the Amazon, 31% of the world's fresh water, over 50% of the soybean for the globe. 60% of the world's lithium is in this region: gold, copper, silver, rare earths. It's just off the charts.
You know, when we interacted when you were serving as commander of Southcom, you'd often be explaining how, from a military footprint standpoint, it was a sort of missed opportunity, and not just from the military footprint, but overall from a sort of a U.S. diplomatic standpoint, that it was overlooked, underemphasized, and been some exceptions to that over the years. Certainly, for those who followed President Trump's first term in office, he very much focused on the region. But as you think about the disposition of U.S. forces and the disposition, really broadly speaking, of U.S. sort of foreign policy institutions, the Western Hemisphere is taken a back seat, despite all those fundamentals you've just outlined. I mean, I tend to think of it as, if you thought about military presence in Southcom, you think about sort of the hospital ships, USS Comfort or something like that.
Right.
Not the sort of firepower that we see President Trump bringing to the Western Hemisphere. Now, as we took that perhaps eye off the ball, or weren't focused on Western Hemisphere, something you emphasized in command was China's focus on the Western Hemisphere, and maybe just take a minute because we'll talk about Venezuela, but the Chinese interest here, the People's Republic of China, has increased with every passing year when we perhaps have been focused elsewhere.
Yeah, so the Belt and Road Initiative that China has implemented in this region, as it has in other places across the globe, and certainly this region hasn't been spared. And so I would just say the Western Hemisphere is about 7 to 10 years behind Africa
Right.
and what has taken place there. And under the guise of this economic development and investment that China has, when really I look at it as extraction to the countries of which the Belt and Road Initiative has taken effect. 23 of 31 nations had signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative in the Western Hemisphere, and I really chalk that up to that being a necessity because there was nothing else there.
Hmm.
And if I just roll the tape back a little bit in terms of the GDP impacts of COVID, that had anywhere from 8.5% GDP impact to 18.5%, depending. A region that relies a lot on tourism. And so, obviously COVID took its toll. And then the crime wave that ensued after COVID as well. I would say, just talking about COVID, we weren't the first there to help our neighbors with a vaccine. The Chinese vaccine, the Sinopharm vaccine was first there, then the Russian vaccine, and then finally U.S. vaccines became available. But it wasn't there when the countries really, really needed it. But when you just look at the economic impacts, and then you add on to that 8 million people have fled out of Venezuela as a result of President Maduro and what he has done. An illegitimate president, by the way, who stole the last election. And, into a region that is already having a hard time supporting their own people. And so, if I just take this Belt and Road Initiative, without, Team USA, US companies bidding on the tenders that come out from these countries on critical infrastructure, deep water ports, 5G, space, energy grids, water. We're not competing as we should be. So we
Yeah.
can't complain about not getting selected for tenders if we're not competing for the tenders in the first place.
It was always interesting to me that that insight came from the four-star commander and something that our diplomatic corps you didn't hear from enough. Although I know in the last administration, Secretary of Commerce Raimondo would travel you and try to to counter some of this. But as you know, with 23 out of 31 of countries joining the Belt and Road Initiative, there was a lot of ground to make up. But squarely within the military domain, what does it mean to the region to have sort of increased military presence, or the sort of military presence that President Trump has put forward now, speculating that it has to do with certainly putting pressure on the Maduro regime? The mindset of countries in the region. What's your sense of how they look at this?
So I would say the in terms of the military capabilities for Team USA and being in the region, and I would say that over time that just the capabilities and the availability of having naval ships, Coast Guard vessels, and things like that has just decreased over time. Due to different things, hotspots around the globe, east and west.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that modernization efforts from the Navy and also the Coast Guard, and so the priorities were other places.
Well, modernization efforts to me sounds like a euphemism for basically losing capability in the hopes that we get something to replace it, but nothing with us right now. It's like we're just the modernization hasn't delivered anything that's usable in the present.
Yeah, so I would just say that now there's a lot of capability there, probably more so than folks are really used to seeing. But the efforts of readiness and training with partners that can take place at this time, and that it is taking place, by the joint task force that's leading this Caribbean effort under Southcom. There all the partnerships and those kinds of things that this time will not be wasted at all, and will be utilized tremendously in terms of continuing this training and increasing of readiness for the service.
I mean, this has all been built around, I guess, two things. From the Trump administration standpoint, they're very much related. It's dealing with narco traffickers and dealing with the Maduro regime. To what extent is the posture here one that you think could have a material impact on the flow of narcotics? I mean, we've had since September more than half a dozen, or around at least half a dozen strikes on on narco vessels that, according to the Trump administration, were going to, leaving many, I think all of them or most of them, Venezuelan waters, going to the United States. The dealing with counter narcotics is a part of Southcom's roles and responsibilities, and on the military side, it always has been. This isn't a new thing. What kind of
Right.
impact can that have on the flow of narcotics into the United States?
Yeah, so I think that you have a huge optic right now with all the military capability that's in the region. And certainly the word is out, obviously, with the interdiction of the vessels that has occurred so far. But really, if you look about the look at the pressure campaign that I think is really pressuring the Maduro regime,
Yeah.
and as our Secretary of State has said, this is a war on narco terrorists, and they're going after them. And the thing is that in U.S. Southcom, when I was there, and the previous commanders did it, and I know the command continues to do that. But the Admiral Halsey had testified that $358 billion annual revenue business by these
Yeah.
transnational criminal organizations. I mean, this is huge. This is big money. And how do you break these networks that is crushing in some cases, this region, but that has global connections, right? And then how is all this money, when you talk about money laundering and all those things to clean this money and being able to follow that money, this is really, really complex. That takes the entire, globe of countries to be working against this problem set.
Yeah, I remember years ago, I had the opportunity when I was staffer on the House Armed Services Committee to go to Jayad of South, which is one of the task forces that dealt with counter narcotics, and it was really interesting. It was joint interagency task force, I believe, and showed the complexity, even just for the United States, in terms of all the agencies that work together, from Coast Guard to different other civilian agencies and Department of Justice and the military, trying to wrap its arms around uh, the flow of narcotics into the United States, drug trafficking, and the like. But from the military standpoint, just the mere presence alone clearly is putting pressure and going to force changes in their tactics and operations. I mean, one of the critiques early on when the first strikes were announced was, oh, that's happening in the Caribbean side, sort of the eastern side. Most of this stuff is happening on the Pacific side. Well, what do you know? The recent strikes, or at least one, was on the Pacific side. What do you think happens next? As having followed this closely, well, how do the tactics change from the narco trafficker standpoint? Where would you look to next if they recognize that going out on a fast boat is going to lead to an early death?
Well, you can't interdict your way out of this problem set. Absolutely not. And so that's why I think what's happening now is really just the optic and the pressure campaign to be present with all of this capability and the sort of indications that there are more things to come, possibly. And like I said, the Maduro being in the seat, he is in bed with the axis of aggressors. I thought Ambassador Story had said it well on his 60 Minutes interview. Absolutely. The Russian equipment, the Iranian equipment, the Iranian president who visited, as well as the Duma from Russia, And it just continues to foster this, this axis of aggressors, and gives them a place to be able to launch from all these criminal activities.
So let's talk about the Maduro regime and our Secretary of State, Secretary Rubio's repeated references as a narco state engaged in narco terrorism. That's where the military presence, is building up. A lot of speculation. President of the United States has referenced the possibility of a land strike, in other words, a strike into Venezuela. What is the Maduro impact regionally? I mean, as you traveled around, I mean, this was before this administration, before January 2025. What is the sort of the cumulative effect? And then we'll talk about the axis in terms of their partnerships and cooperation with regimes outside of the Western Hemisphere. But what is the cumulative effect you saw of a Maduro, what our Secretary of State refers to as a narco terrorist regime on
Yeah,
the
well, I
region?
mean, inviting all of these our axis of aggressors into the country, then the relationships with Cuba, Nicaragua, and just continuing to foster this so close to our U.S. homeland and within our own hemisphere that we live, and and just being able to continue to do it.
Mm.
The threatening of Guyana. So you have Colombia on the western side, and you've got the country of Guyana on the eastern side, and fastest growing GDP country in the globe for the next 5 years, 25% per year. You've got all this offshore oil that was discovered off of Guyana. And then you've got Maduro threatening to take half of Guyana as a supposed disputed region called the
Hmm.
Essequibo. And ironically enough, half of the offshore oil is off that disputed area
Funny
as
how that
well.
works out, huh? It's
Yeah,
disputed of interest
yeah.
once that's the energy rich area. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So it just, and then, as I mentioned before, one of the worst humanitarian crises across our globe that's happened with 8 million people leaving that country into the region that already. I mean, I've been to numerous migrant shelters. I've talked to the families that have been there.
Hmm.
So even as Panama was able to shut down the Darien Jungle Path, where the migrants typically came through in Central America. Still, I mean, they were all coming to the United States. Most of them were from Venezuela. And most of them, ironically, families, little kids, getting ready to make a trek of a lifetime if they made it.
So you're talking all elements of instability coming out of Venezuela in terms of the immigration challenges, of course, the conflict within the region, and sort of this aggression on neighboring states, and then of course the support it's getting from the other sort of axis of aggressor countries. In terms of Maduro's relationship with the Putins, with the Islamic Republic of Iran, how much were you tracking this interaction? I mean, was this a sort of kind of engagement that was building up, or it's always sort of been steady state since you were found yourself in the command?
I think it's always been steady state. We just haven't paid a lot of attention
Hmm.
to it. When other things are going on, but I was always tracking it. All right, the U.S. Southern Command's always tracking those visits, high-level visits from our axis of aggressor countries coming to Venezuela. But it just gives my mind. It just gives what the Chinese have done with the Belt and Road
Yeah.
Initiative. I've said quite a few times that I think the first and second island chain to our homeland has already been put in place by China with the Belt and Road Initiative and the Caribbean countries, because our U.S. and Western companies just aren't there competing on the critical infrastructure. The investment that they are doing so close to our homeland. And then you have the country of Venezuela that further just allows criminal activity, the narco trafficking, all of the illegal activities to take place. And, under the guise of a legitimate government, which it is not.
and to use the language of first and the second island chain. It's the language, of course, that your colleagues of the Indo-Pacific Command would use to talk about China's ambition to
Right.
reach out beyond Taiwan and into Japan. That they should become the regional hegemon and not be bound in any way by the U.S. alliance structure. So you're framing it that China's trying to do the same thing to us, as it were, in our own hemisphere. And that in part, I think, is what's driven you to say. I'd love to talk about this in terms of what beyond the crisis of the moment, right? So the need for a increased military presence to target the Maduro regime, to get after the narco traffickers. You have been someone who said that there should be a steady state, a persistent presence for the U.S. military
Yeah.
in the Western Hemisphere. Talk about that, because I think the mindset right now is this is sort of a one-off. We'll deal with the particular current present crisis. That's not your approach to this. You're seeking something else as an expert, someone who's experienced in the region, that the U.S. needs to prioritize sort of going forward on a most permanent basis.
Yeah, so I would say, we've had capability in the region. And, for example, there used to be a capability of an ARGMU that sailed around the region during hurricane season. So,
There's an expeditionary unit for the Marines, right?
yes, yes. A mini aircraft carrier, so to speak, with a lot of Marines on it, but a lot of engineer capability, and it would be available, right, for storms. So we have a storm that's headed directly for a impact in Jamaica, and supposedly going to be a Category 5 storm. And so, I mean, these Caribbean countries can get decimated by one storm. And, the capability, I'm just glad that there's an ARGMU now in the
Right.
region that can move out of the way. The storm will hit, and they can be there right on site and ready to help with recovery efforts.
All right, so let's play a little sort of scenario game with you here for a second. We're with General Laura Richardson. Served 38 years in the U.S. Army. She flew Black Hawk helicopters. Recently retired. Her last command was as commander of U.S. Southcom. You put your uniform back on. You're with your colleagues, the other combatant commanders. You have the general officer responsible for Indo-Pacific Command, the general officer responsible for Central Command, the Middle East, the general officer responsible for European Command. We got other combatant commands, but I'll give those three sort of heavyweights in terms of heavyweights from the standpoint of not they wouldn't meet Secretary Hegseth's fitness requirements. I'm referring specifically to their ability to get military platforms in their area of responsibility. And you're there representing U.S. Southcom, and you're making the case, hey, I get it that we got the Ukraine war. I get it that we have, the Gaza war and the larger Middle East challenge. I get it that we have to deal with the PRC, but we still need to have significant military assets in the Western Hemisphere. My sense is in the past, those debates, however eloquently and persuasively you made the case, General, you were losing out to those other players. Tell us what your best argument was, and perhaps what might stick as an argument now going forward.
Yeah, so and I would say I didn't ask for a significant amount of capability,
Right.
because, honestly, a little goes a long way in this region, right? And the thing is that these countries want to partner with the United States. They want to partner with Team USA first. But if we're not there, then they look to where they got to get ability to show progress. I mean, you've got democracies, 28 of 31 democracies in this region. These presidents get in the seat, and they're there, and usually for one term of 4 years. So if you think about it, like I took my 3 years in command and I broke it down into quarters, because 3 years seems like a really long time, but you break it down into quarters. I had 12 quarters, right? To make a difference. And then all of a sudden I felt like I was way behind. So, you think about the timeline that presidents got to show progress for their people, they're looking at like a couple months. And so when you got Ukraine's going on and things like that going on, we actually have 11 countries in the region that have Russian equipment. And so
Mm.
the State Department actually had a program where, if the countries give up their Russian equipment either to the U.S. or donate it to Ukraine, then we would backfill that equipment with U.S. Military equipment, right? Which I think was, but you just see that, out of 31 countries, 11 of them already have Russian equipment. You see that, the relationship building that Russia has been doing,
Mm.
right, over time. And so, but my argument in terms of this region being our hemisphere, the more that we can buffer our own hemisphere, buffer our own country, but it's not, I always say it was Team USA in support of Team Democracy, right? And so you create partnerships where you're there consistently, not just during this administration or that administration, right? That we're there always consistently, and we will be there first and foremost for our neighbors, right?
But and that's an argument for presence of you know State Department, other agencies, in addition to uh, the U.S. military. But from a military firepower standpoint, my sense is that we did not have sufficient platforms and presence that sent the message that whatever the Monroe Doctrine is for the 21st century, that this is our hemisphere, and as a result, from a
Yeah,
security standpoint, it starts with us. We're going to have
right.
a new national defense strategy that will be released at some point, along with a national security strategy. We always talk. Every national defense strategy talks about, hey, it's the homeland first, it's a hemisphere first, and then we go on to other regions of the world. But from a military presence standpoint, from a platform standpoint, from the sort of prioritization of resources standpoint, it's finished, a distant fourth or fifth in terms of priorities, maybe even beyond, further down than that. Do you think we'll see a change this go around?
I think we will see a change. I mean, in Trump one, we saw a buildup of military capability as well, and certainly there's quite a bit more capability there now. But the thing is that the administration is consistent there. I would say that the being able to show that you're there with capability and but like I said, a little goes a long way, so you don't always need to
You
have
you don't even have
aircraft carriers.
2.0 carrier presence. No, I get it,
Right.
but it did strike me. I mean that it wasn't enough back when you were there. That
Right.
it really seemed to be deficient.
And so, Roger, I would say, and I testified to this, that
Yeah.
with the capability that we were given, right, for Jayad of South to go after the illicit air and maritime traffic, drug trafficking routes, that we were getting after, we were able to get after about 10% of the problem. That's not enough.
Yeah.
And so, certainly, again, I think that this is a big pressure campaign for something bigger than blowing, and
Fast boats.
interdicting fast boats, right? But the historical routes of all the drug trafficking coming to the U.S., going to Europe, we have all of that. We have it all. But again, I go back to how powerful these networks are, how global they are now, and how they continue to grow and become
Yeah.
more
And it
powerful.
takes persistence, and it needs something, military as a component of, but not sufficient. I take all those points. But just imagine for a moment, we're going to wrap up our conversation here in a moment with it. But first, we'll need to jump to Argentina just to get your expert view on developments there as well. But imagine for a moment a post Maduro Venezuela. Imagine that the people of Venezuela actually get to truly select their leader. This is a true representative democracy that is aligned with the United States. What does that do to the axis of aggressors? What does that do for the feel and integration between the United States and the rest of the Western Hemisphere?
Well, I would say that they elected democratically on their
Yes.
last election, right? Their next leader. And so, having Venezuela return to the great country that it once was before Maduro, And you know, I mean, 70% of the people are in poverty, for God's sakes, right? I mean, it's again one of the worst humanitarian crises in our globe right now. And so, you know, returning Venezuela back to, you know, one of the most wealthiest nations in the
It's
globe.
shocking given the resources. I mean, it's how upside down that country is.
Yep. But just being able to do that, the stability that that would provide, you know, and Brazil plays a really big role in that. Guyana plays a really big role in that. Colombia plays a really big role in that. All of it. All of them working together. And we need the countries working together. We need to bring this to an end.
Last question. We'll move from Venezuela to Argentina. Malay's Freedom Party, President Malay's Freedom Party, doubled its representation in Argentina's Congress. So at the time of this recording, this is a big win, and sort of now he's got the political backing to continue his pro-market, free market policies. What does that do to the region? How would you sort of, if you're sitting back in Miami at the Southcom's headquarters, how would you look at the impact of political developments in Argentina within and around the region?
Well, having been the commander for 3 years, 2021 to 2024, and working with the previous administration prior to Malay, and watching that country with Chinese presence and engagement so prevalent, and this close to Argentina buying Chinese fighter aircraft, the JF-17. And to see the Malay administration get in the seat, and within 30 days, they bought the Danish F-16 aircraft, NATO interoperable aircraft. And they continue to align with the United States and with democracy. You know, I don't want to say that it's just about aligning with the United States. It's really about this is really between authority. What's going on right now across our globe is between
That's freedom versus authoritarians.
Exactly.
No, absolutely.
And so I see it exactly as that. This country, Argentina, being the seventh largest, used to be the seventh largest and wealthiest country in the globe, and to see the almost 200% inflation under the previous administration before Malay. And the drastic and draconian efforts that he's had to take to change that course of the country. And so happy to see the results.
Good day for Argentina and for the free world. I agree with you. We're going to leave it there. General Laura Richardson, thank you so much for joining the show and giving us your unique and important perspective on the Western Hemisphere.